Community Church, Unitarian Universalist. I'm your worship associate, Sally Jackson, and it is a joy to be with you in person and virtually today. So who are we as Community Church? We're a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Please look to your weekly email for announcements. Okay. I would tell you to sing along because we don't know the words, but this is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade hub on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bolancha. Tribes that have lived on this land include the Caddo, the Natchez, the Choctaw, Chimatacha, Ona, the Tunica, Biloxi, Atacapa, and Ashaka, among others. We recognize that as a result of broken treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here.
I don't think there's many announcements today, but I did want to take this opportunity for a public service announcement. This is from a website called Pet Amber Alert. Whether the neighborhood teens are throwing firecrackers on their street or your entire community is enjoying the exuberant splendor of big fireworks display, your pet can become frantic and run away. More pets go missing around the 4th of July than any other time of year. According to national statistics, animal control officials across the country see a 30 to 60% increase in lost pets each year between July 4th and July 6th. In fact, July 5th is one of the busiest day of the years for shelters. Sadly, only 14% of pets are returned to their owners according to nationwide statistics, and worse, 30 to 60% of lost pets are euthanized because they cannot be properly identified and returned to their owners. So they have some recommendations, simple steps that you can take if you have pets. Make sure they're inside, make them feel safe, avoid the noise if you can, act normal with normal routines, and protect your pet before the fireworks begin. There are now high-tech lost pet devices with GPS systems and with linked QR codes, and by following these tips, hopefully your pet can be safe. And I know if you can't avoid the noise, a lot of veterinarians give sedation pills to help calm them in that stressful time. So, anyone else have any announcements? So, my opening words for you. So, my opening words for you are from Martin Luther King. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. All humans are caught in an inescapable network of mutual mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality.
It is Community Church's custom to light a chalice, invoking hope and eternal truth to our worship. Please join in singing We Light This Flame. Well, now, CCUU's Religious Education Director, Cynthia Ramirez, brings us her words for all ages.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Happy 4th of July. Yay! Food and fireworks. Okay, I'm going to read to you today. It's called Of History and Hope by Miller Williams. We have memorized America, how it was born, and who we have been and where. In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly, we do. The great and all the anonymous dead are there. We know the sound of all the sounds we brought. The rich taste of it is on our tongues. But where are we going to be, and why, and who? The disenfranchised dead want to know. We mean to be the people we meant to be, to keep on going where we meant to go. But how do we fashion the future? Who can we say how, except in the mind of those we call it, capitalized now? The children. The children. And how does our garden grow? With waving hands, or rarely in a row, of flowering faces and brambles that we can no longer allow. Who were many people coming together cannot become one people falling apart. Who dreamed for every child and an even chance cannot let luck alone turn doorknobs or not. Whose law was never so much of the hand as the head cannot let chaos make its way to the heart. Who has seen learning struggle from teacher to child cannot let ignorance spread itself like rot. We know what we have done and what we have said and how we have grown, degree by slow degree, believing ourselves toward all we have tried to become, just and passionate, equal, able, and free. All this is in the hands of children, eyes already set on a land we never can visit. It isn't there yet. But looking through their eyes, we see what our long gift to them may come to be. If we can truly remember, they will never forget. Thank you. There's children out here, we'll sing with them anyways.
Now is our sacred time of joys and sorrows. If you're online, please write your joys and sorrows in the comments section to be read aloud. If you're in person, there are cards of joys and sorrows in our foyer. If you're not able to fill one out earlier, please feel free to do so during our musical interlude. And we thank you. And our musical interlude is hymn number 85. Okay. This is from General Neal. Sorrow that the Supreme Court continues to take us backwards, causing suffering and hardships. And we also have a sorrow from Rebecca Broom. Weighing heavy on my heart today is the sudden passing of a work colleague. I try to make it more difficult than it is, I'm sorry. Okay. I've known for over 8 years. She was an inspiring person and leaves behind a young daughter and husband. She will be missed. I would love to bring a joy to everybody. It's hard to think of them right now, but the 100-degree weather isn't going to last forever. How's that for a joy? Does anybody else have anything they needed to add? Okay. We'll light 2 more candles. One for the joy still bubbling up, 2 new to share. And one for the sorrows that we cannot yet put into words, knowing that we love you and hold you in our hearts.
So my first reading to you this morning is by Christina Jo, and she is a writer for Newsweek. And she wrote this last year. Black progressive lawmakers on Sunday questioned the inclusivity of freedom celebrated on Independence Day at the White House prepared for an evening of traditional festivities. As Biden's White House readied fireworks and burgers for America's annual celebration of nationhood, progressives expressed their views on what the 4th of July means from the Black American perspective. On July 5, 1852, abolitionist Frederick Douglass challenged the hypocrisy of the Declaration of Independence in a keynote address commemorating its signing. What to the slave is the 4th of July, he asked. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is a constant victim. Jo continues, this year, America moved to designate Juneteenth as a federal holiday. But for decades, many Black people have been celebrating their freedom, the Day of Freedom, on June 19th, which commemorates the emancipation of African American slaves. Author Touré asked, independence for who? It wasn't independence for Black people, for our ancestors. So why would we celebrate the 4th of July? He also cited the Pulitzer Prize-winning essay for the 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, which noted the colonies sought to emancipate from Britain partly to protect the institution of slavery. Touré wrote, America wanted to protect its cash cow, and even more, it was wealth derived from slavery that allowed the colonies to afford to pay for the War of Independence. The founding of this country is intertwined with slavery, and why would we celebrate that? And now for our next hymn, which will be Once to Every Soul and Nation, hymn number 119. sermon, I have a second reading for you. This one is from Ethan Keitel and Blaine Roberts. They write both for the Atlantic monthly magazine. And this was written 2018, and it's spec circuited, very abbreviated. And the article is called "When the 4th of July Was a Black Holiday." We're going to refer to Frederick Douglass again. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? Famed black abolitionist and former slave Frederick Douglass, who posed this question before a large and mostly white crowd in Rochester, New York on July 5th, 1852. He said, "It is a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim." Douglass explained, adding that he felt much the same. "I am not included within the pale of this glorious anniversary. This 4th of July is yours, not mine." A little more than a decade later, however, African Americans, like Douglass, began making the glorious anniversary their own. After the end of the Civil War in 1865, the nation's 4 million newly emancipated citizens transformed Independence Day into a celebration of Black freedom. The 4th became an almost exclusively African American holiday in the states of the former Confederacy, until white Southerners, after violently reasserting their dominance of the region, snuffed these Black commemorations out. Before the Civil War, white Americans from every corner of the country had annually marked the 4th with feasts, parades, and copious quantities of alcohol. A European visitor observed that it was almost the only holy day kept in America. Black Americans demonstrated considerably less enthusiasm, and those who did observe the holiday preferred, like Douglass, to do so on July 5, to better accentuate the differences between the high promises of the 4th and the low realities for life for African Americans, while also avoiding confrontations with drunken white revelers. Yet the tables had turned by July 4th, 1865, at least in the South. Having lost a bloody 4-year war to break free from the United States and defend the institution of slavery, Confederate sympathizers had little desire to celebrate the 4th, now that they were back in the Union and slavery was no more. The white people, wrote a young woman in Columbia, South Carolina, shut themselves within doors. African Americans, meanwhile, embraced the 4th like never before. From Washington, D.C. to Mobile, Alabama, they gathered together to watch fireworks and listen to orators recite the Emancipation Proclamation, the Declaration of Independence, and the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery when it was ratified in late 1865. The martial displays at this and subsequent celebrations underscored what was happening each year. Thousands of Black Carolinians lined up to watch African American militia companies march through the city street, led by mounted officers, some of who were ex-slaves. These Black companies were often named for abolitionists and other Black heroes. In Charleston and elsewhere, whites deeply resented their former slaves, turning the 4th into a commemoration of Black liberty. "What a dreadful day it was," complained one Charleston planter in a letter to his daughter. Even some northern whites could not abide what they saw. And at the 1865 festivities in Mobile, federal troops from Illinois and Indiana were overheard wishing new freed slaves dead. They got their wish in part in the decade to come, as the 4th of July celebrations became more politically charged affairs. On July 4th, 1875, a white mob broke up a rally in Vicksburg, Mississippi, killing a Black deputy sheriff. The next year in the village of Hamburg, South Carolina, anger over a black militia parade on the 4th boiled over into a full-blown riot that left at least 7 African Americans dead at the hands of white vigilantes. The Hamburg massacre helped conservatives wrest control of local and state governments. As they removed black commemorations from public spaces, white Southerners deployed racist tropes to question black affection for the holiday. Beneath the ridicule that existed was something more serious, a concerted effort to delegitimize black claims to the holiday. African Americans did not observe the 4th, white critics sneered, out of a sincere sense of patriotism or an accurate understanding of what the day meant. After all, they insisted, the 4th of July did not apply to black Americans. It neither represented their freedom nor testified to their status as people worthy of equal citizenship. Reframing who could rightfully celebrate Independence Day proved crucial in the service of unifying national white supremacy. In the Jim Crow South, where segregation, disenfranchisement, and racial lynching were the order of the day, the message was clear. African Americans were as unfit for the fruits of freedom as they were for the 4th of July. Once again, as Frederick Douglass had said a half-century earlier, black Americans were not included within the pale of their nation's birthday. So, with our 4th of July holiday, many are engaged in lovely festivities, and I, like many, enjoy grilled veggies on the barbecue and fireworks, but as you might guess, my dog doesn't, and my sermon is not about those festivities. It's often a weekend for those fortunate enough to have jobs and benefits, to have a 3 or 4 day weekend. Rituals include barbecues, road trips, and fireworks. The 4th of July holiday, traditionally for many who celebrate freedom, now in 2023, is a holiday where we can ponder more. What does it mean to have freedom for us? What does it mean just in general to be free? What does it mean to be in community? What does it mean to expand our views of what community means to us? How do we celebrate? Sometimes from the sidelines, in how we decide to celebrate freedom for our communities. With the 4th of July bringing up thoughts and ideals, for many, primarily white, of freedom, as with many things in life, there are perspectives and subjective experiences with different lived views. If freedom was declared on 4th of July when slavery was still in effect in 1776, it was only for white men. Albeit it gave the possibility 300 years ago to think about expanded freedoms. But centuries later, we still had Jim Crow laws, and our current day prison systems still have inequality and granted in them. So we can look historically at dominant cultural views of freedom, but how does that bind us to where we see struggles of freedom now? This last week, it is no longer it's not only illegal to be undocumented in Florida, but anyone assisting to save their lives will also be arrested. And we've seen this play out in the nation before in Texas and other areas. LGBTQ communities continue to be targeted for living peaceful in their authentic lives, illegal simply because of who they are. And gun violence continues to kill families and communities. Amidst all these injustices, how do we talk about and ponder what freedom looks like in our country today? Another area where there is still no equality in our inequalities in our prison systems. The Innocent Project is an example of a nonprofit that works on the injustices of our prison system, and it's a nonprofit that helps free innocent people sentenced to life in prison and those serving unjust sentences. They recognize the root causes of wrongful convictions and unjust sentences as systemic racism and inequities. They work to expose and address these root causes by sharing their client stories in court, in legislature, the community, and the media. Here's one of those brief stories by Gregory Bright. 13 minutes of deliberations by a jury, guilty as charged based solely on the unsubstantiated and uncorroborated testimony of one witness who didn't see the actual shooting. Me and my co-defendant had our freedom taken away on that. We were sentenced to spend the balance of our natural lives of hard labor and custody at the Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola without benefit of parole, probation, or suspension of sentence. There was a lot of handshaking going on among prosecutors, and my mother was in tears. So we can look at some of these statistics that the Innocent Project is concerned about, and hence doing their important work. 56% of 551 DNA exonerations in the U.S. were due to mistaken witness identifications. In Louisiana, 20 out of 22. Blacks and African Americans make up 13% of our prison population, or 13% of our population, yet make up 38% of those serving prison sentences. 45% of those serving prison sentences are solely for drug use, primarily marijuana. Next is explosive and arson, then sex offenders at 12%, then immigration at 5%. Another way to summarize this is that half of those serving prison sentences are mostly blacks with crimes of smoking a joint or selling marijuana to white customers, and those who cross for safety and security where they can't find that in their countries of origin. Under the 5% threshold of those serving prison sentences include murder, burglary, robbery, embezzlement, and continuing criminal enterprises. There are many statistics out there, including a 2019 study, that the percentage of black, white, and Hispanic use of marijuana is identical. Here in Louisiana, it is no longer a felony to carry half an ounce of marijuana along with the country, and pardons have been made by President Biden at the federal level where those crimes that were committed years ago are no longer felonies in the United States. And the New Orleans Police Department no longer gives citations for simple use of marijuana. Yet here in Louisiana, although the government does not have the authority, unlike other states, to exonerate people in state prisons, as President Biden did in federal prison. So here in Louisiana, those pardons have not been given. And those who do have the power to pardon the state equivalent did not do so here in the state of Louisiana, with the majority of those serving prison offenses. Because those who are continuing to serve prison sentences here in Louisiana are doing so, but they're no longer felonies. But because it occurred years ago, they continue to serve. And so it made me wonder, what is compassionate or free about this situation? If our freedom depends on or is connected to the non-freedom of others, it is time to rethink what we mean about the concept of freedom. So when we talk about freedom and independence, are we talking about history in the 18th century, or are we talking about it now? And have times really changed that much in what we're talking about? Because in all situations, we're talking about the privileged white citizenship of this country. We can look at other examples of where freedom is in question in our nation and the world. We still have child labor in the poorest of countries, and without international governing bodies such as the United Nations, little accountability in how nations support or undermine each other is given into account. Those who can't vote continue to be formerly incarcerated people and non-citizens, often the most vulnerable among us. Other countries losing their independence or trying to keep it, such as Ukraine, with the violence and displacement affecting others across the world, as violence always does. Gun violence with our children continue to be targets, and yet accessibility increases. Farm factories and how other living creatures are treated inhumanely and without compassion also increases the destruction of sustainable forms of caring for our earth and each other. So here in the United States, we celebrate often freedom as an ideal to strive for constantly, but it has never fully been attained. We must look where freedom is not granted in terms of those who have struggled for freedom and still struggle to obtain it. Khrushchev of the Soviet Union said in the 1950s, "We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy it from within." So it makes me wonder about all those Russian spy movies of late and adulthood. There's Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, now Putin. Was it a long game? I don't know. Maybe knowing that the U.S. outpowers every other nation in armament, maybe other approaches were being pondered, which would be ideology. So freedom for all is always at stake at multiple levels. We need to think about collective welfare over individual welfare. It's a tricky thing, balancing those who wish to obtain more power, capitalism, not caving in to communists who also want to obtain power for their own sake, and with the freedom of democratic ideals. It's not that I will keep what is mine regardless of literal and existential cost, and you are left to your own devices. That is not a society looking towards healthy communities or healthy democracies with safety nets and investing in each other as humans. So there are the ideological differences that create and maintain communities. Maybe Khrushchev saw that if not forced external threats, that changing the ideology year by year, decade by decade, chipping away, that there would be more effective long-term results. Violence and violent ideologies have no political party or view except gaining power for power's sake. It's no wonder that there are so many allegories about power in the Bible, and that it was Jesus who comes to the defense of the powerless in the New Testament time after time after time. We also have more modern day peace leaders. Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Eleanor Roosevelt, Mother Teresa, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Dalai Lama, Shirley Chisholm, MLK, and Malala Yousafzai. These exemplars and prophets, I think we can say that as Unitarian Universalists, that they are prophets, isn't just to read and be inspired by their words, but to be inspired enough to act and engage in this world so that we can all be our own prophetic voices. That is the gift that they have all provided us. An opportunity to be inspired, an opportunity to make beneficial meaning in this world, the promise of building beloved community, the promise to strive for our democratic ideals. We have been big on this idea of independence, independent country, independent individuals, and yet we are part of communities, whether family, friends, our working environments, or living off the land of Earth. And again, we visit that quote by Martin Luther King Jr. All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So Martin Luther King Jr. wrote this in his Birmingham jail cell, an incarcerated black man. So we get to the existential predicament. How can one be free when others aren't? We don't only have to look at our history to question why white men claimed freedom as genocide was occurring at the same time of indigenous peoples and that slavery was active all across the country, or that a white woman at that time had no voting rights for another 200 years. It did give a platform for future freedoms, but we still aren't there. We also have an estimated 40,000 children in cages living near the borders because they aren't citizens and they are under age 18. And as mentioned, we have mostly black men in prison serving life sentences for minor drug charges that are now legal. And for trans people, it is illegal just to exist in certain states in this country. So times need to change, and they are changing. We can even just look at physical science relative to quantum science. Entanglement theories show that things are interconnected. And once you see that one thing is interconnected, you can't stop it. Everything is interconnected, as Martin Luther King and other prophets have said over the years. We have Earth and climate change just as a daily example. What happens in, let's say, Tunisia has a ripple effect in climates elsewhere across the world. Justice has ripple effects. When a community has injustices of poverty, the whole community experiences a sense of poverty as well. So how do we invest in our values and have more equality for all and have flourishing lives together? We need to acknowledge that our independence as a white nation was based on the genocide of indigenous people in slavery, and that isn't freedom. But we can still celebrate and advocate it for the promise of others that have yet to experience it. We can see the United Nations as an example of a political body working for the greater good of community beyond the self-interests of individual nation states, as an example. Even our Unitarian Universalist Association bylaws, known as Article 2, that includes our Declaration of Faith and Purpose and Principles, is being re-looked at to see if it meets the world in its spiritual needs and a liberal faith today. So times are changing. And in general, society and organizations contract and expand as the universe does as a whole. Sometimes contracting is intentional and inwardly focused, but right now our world is suffering at so many levels, individually and the earth as a whole, and everything in between. What the world needs now is to expand outward with our compassion and love. And so again, I'm going to say these words of Martin Luther King because I think they are so prophetic. In a real sense, all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be, and you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. So this is where we are as a society in the liberal religious tradition. Acknowledging where harm has been done, engaging in compassion and equality, believing that sins are not eternal, amends can always be done, actions that heal an interdependent world can always be engaged in, and we ponder the fallacy of independence and the shackles of life, whether literal or figuratively, when commenting on our spirits. and the paradox that the only true independence we have is our interdependence with each other. This is the promise of love.
Amen.
May it be so. Now it is time for our offering. The Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosities help us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at ccunola.org/stewardship or by text 504-370-2659 and text give. And of course, you can give here in person. You can raise your hand and we'll come to you. We give 50% of our plate to a cause, our congregation, and its social justice ministry support. For the month of July, we will be giving 50% of our plate to concerned citizens of St. John the Baptist Parish. Their mission is to advocate for the health and safety of all citizens by working to hold government officials and industry accountable for the quality of their air, water, and soil, to collect all facts about their environment and share that information with the citizens of St. John the Baptist Parish. They aggressively advocate for the safety and future of the children of their parish and provide leadership in moving their community forward in all avenues that impact their daily lives. And one reason why this nonprofit is so critical for our region and the work that they do is they have the highest cancer rate in the nation due to the exposure of chloroprene. They have the highest rate COVID-19 deaths per capita in this country, and they have the highest asthma rates among children anywhere in the United States. So this is why they are doing the important work that they need to do in their community. So please give generously. Thank you.
We're using hymn 127 and 127.
And 127.
And each verse happens twice.
So we extinguish our chalice here that it might flow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place, and may it guide your way until we are together again. And for my benediction, I'm reading number 692 in the back of our hymnal by Laurelyn Bellamy. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help another, that they may come true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world, and go in peace. And so now for our next hymn, number 151, I Wish I Knew How. just follow the template of that hymn, things would be in a beautiful direction. And so in that spirit, happy 4th, spread love, spread freedom. May it be so, and may we see each other in the fellowship hall for coffee if you'd like.